Hello, all you beautiful people out there, and if you are new, welcome to my channel. Why don't you go down, hit the subscribe button, and ring the bell so you don't miss any episodes. For my fans and subscribers, welcome back. You are the lifeblood and backbone of this channel. Today I'm going to be talking about Jim Jones, Jim and Marceline. Not much else I need to say. Well, let's get on with the video. By 1969, Jim and Marceline had been married for 20 years. Obviously, people change in 20 years, but both Jim and Marceline experienced extreme changes. When they met, Marceline wanted to experience life outside of her hometown, and young Jim appealed to her religious beliefs, which included a hands-on approach. During their marriage, Marceline gradually adopted the radical ideas of her husband. She came to realize that when she had married Jim, she really did not understand how blacks in America were treated. And to be fair, I am a white female, so I really don't know how blacks are treated in America, but I try. In time, she not only became an advocate for racial equality, but she also accepted some of Jim's other radical beliefs, including reincarnation and inconsistencies within the Bible. Although she did not believe that Jim was the reincarnated Christ, she did believe he had special powers. And even though she had discovered that his healings and prophecies were fake, she accepted the deception to the point of claiming Jim had cured her of cancer. So kind of like ends justify the means type of rationalizing. When he wasn't in public, Jones was usually self-centered and often thoughtless toward his wife. Gee, imagine that, a narcissist being self-centered. However, she remained convinced that he was mostly good and the world needed him. It was her duty to help him because she knew him best. There was a huge intimate problem, though. Marceline had suffered severe back pain since she was young, sometimes so intense that doctors treated it with traction and bed rest. Carrying and then delivering Stephan had aggravated it. This put a dent in their sex life when Marceline was in pain, but even when she was feeling better, intimacy was limited because Marceline could not have handled another pregnancy. By this time, I think birth control had been invented. Back in Indianapolis, she had been the front woman for dealing with politicians since she had grown up in that world and she knew how to approach them. The trick was to make the temple look appealing as a partner, not a pain in the butt adversary. However, because he had always been a fast learner, by the time they moved to California, he no longer relied on Marceline for political advice. Using what he had learned from her, he would meet politicians by himself or take someone else from the temple. To compensate for the loss of being Jim's political advisor, Marceline began engaging more with temple members. This put her in the role of a mediator between Jim and the members because of his rants from the pulpit. They upset some listeners as well as increased the paranoia of members. It should not be a shock to anyone to learn that Jim demanded obedience. When the members complied, it was Marceline who thanked them. Jim could be super critical if a task had not been done correctly. His wife, too, expected everybody's best, but she preferred explaining to the people how to fix their errors. Jim did realize how important Marceline was to him and his ministry. Temple members may have addressed him as father, but they also called Marceline mother. In fact, after King's assassination, he appointed Marceline as his successor as pastor, but secular matters would be handled by the board of directors. Despite her many temple responsibilities, she tried to give attention to her children and make them feel loved, as well as special as individuals. In 1969, her back gave out completely, and she was mostly confined to bed in traction. Because she was in pain and bored, she snapped at Jim a lot. True, he couldn't help her with the pain, but he could have been more attentive. It's amazing he didn't use his powers to heal her, At this point, he concerned himself with his own sexual gratification. Marceline's condition had curtailed their sex life for a decade, and now she couldn't be available for a long time. Although no evidence exists that he took a mistress previously, he did now. There is no evidence that Jones was unfaithful up until this point, but things changed. Surprisingly, he took 24-year-old Carolyn Layton as his mistress. Though he had his pick of women, she was plain-looking and drab, according to former temple members. Carolyn grew up as the daughter of a Methodist pastor and also a district superintendent for the Methodist Church, who was known for his liberal preaching. Like Marceline, her father had no patience for passive Christianity and raised Carolyn and her sisters to be activists. Eventually, her father ended up in California. In college, she met and married Larry Layton, who shared her beliefs. Larry had registered as a conscientious objector during the Vietnam War, which meant that he had to find alternative civil service, which he found in a Mendocino County mental hospital. Carolyn was dominant in the marriage, so she chose the church in their new location. They attended services at a variety of churches until one day they were offered a ride by the Joneses. It was just natural for them to give People's Temple a try, and Carolyn found that it resonated with her beliefs. In 1968, she and Larry became members. Within the church, Carolyn had a serious demeanor, but away from it, she could be enthusiastic, both toward the temple and its leader. She gushed over her new pastor to her parents. After several weeks of not hearing from their daughter, they drove to Mendocino County only to find out that their daughter was getting divorced. It seems that Jones could not fool everyone, and when he met Carolyn's parents, they immediately pegged him as a con man. They could not understand how Jones had seduced Carolyn so easily. Jim hadn't wanted a simple affair. If that were the case, plenty of women in the church were willing to sleep with him. Even though other members thought Carolyn was cold, Jones saw in her many of Marceline's qualities. Jones needed someone who could communicate his perplexing instructions effectively, as well as make others obey them. Carolyn was smart and, unlike Marceline, had no sexual limitations. From then on, she would be his partner and his intimate lover. However, Jones needed to convince her. Although he sensed that her marriage was rocky, there was not absolute certainty that he could convince her. After all, she had grown up as a minister's daughter, and it was unlikely that she would commit adultery on Jones's request. Approaching her was risky. After all, his flock might be offended to learn that father wanted to cheat on mother. They considered him morally pure, above human carnality. So Jim chose Patty Cartmel as an intermediary. And just as an aside, this is what happens when you assign godlike status to a man. It should come as no surprise to those familiar with this group that Patty Cartmel complied and took Carolyn aside to explain that father had a personal problem. Patty told Carolyn that Marceline was not only physically disabled but also psychologically crippled. She really should be institutionalized. But Jim had a heart of gold and just couldn't bring himself to do it. In order for Jim to maintain his marvelous gifts, Patty said Jim needed emotional support and physical release, which Marceline could no longer provide. Jim recognized that only Carolyn had the qualities and devotion needed to provide these things. Jim's persuasion did the rest. Interestingly, Jones told both Marceline and the kids about the affair, and that he was not going to leave them. This was a calculated risk on his part, because Marceline could make the affair public. However, Jones knew that it was against her character. Once she committed to someone or something, it was for life. The question is, why did Marceline put up with this? The answer is simple. She was taught, as most women in her day were, that if a man strayed from his wedding vows, it was the wife's fault. Of course, because it could never be the man's fault. This meant that Jim could have his affair, while his sheep thought that he and Mother were still in a loving monogamous relationship, which kept his public image intact. Getting away with this only heightened Jim's feeling of entitlement. Well, friends, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button, press the subscribe button, and if you want to know when I come out with new content, hit the bell next to the subscribe button. I have heard that YouTube is unsubscribing some of my subscribers, so if you are already subscribed, make sure you are still subscribed. I don't know what YouTube's doing. All social media links are in the description. As well, there is a join button at the bottom of this video if you would like to become a member of this channel. There are perks. You get custom emojis as well as members only content. Keep learning and searching for truth. Here are a few videos in my library. If you have not watched them, go ahead and watch them and tell me what you think. Also, please leave comments in the comment section. Not only do I love hearing from you, but it also triggers the YouTube algorithm. All social media links are in the description.